you everybody for joining us today. This is part of our summer webinar series that we are kicking off this year. And we're super excited to have Kevin Berson joining us today. So today's topic is going to be creating your ideal business exit. Like I said, this is part one of 4 seminars that we will be hosting this summer, each one about 2 weeks apart. So just stay tuned for more, brochures and flyers that will be coming out on LinkedIn and via email. And so just a little housekeeping. If you do have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. There should be a Q&A little icon at the bottom of your screen, so you can ask questions through that little app. So other than that, let's go ahead and get started. So one of the main things that we wanted to discover today was, do you have a plan in place for your business if, one, you wanted to exit tomorrow on your own terms, or 2, heaven forbid, if something unexpected happened to you and you were forced to exit? Are you prepared? So joining us today to discuss these topics are Kevin Beidenkamp from Tortuga Wealth Management and Kevin Berson with Connected Advisors. Just to give you a little background on Kevin Beidenkamp, he is a co-owner and managing partner and co-founder of Tortuga Wealth Management. He has his CFP and his CEPA, which stands for Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and a bazillion other letters after his name, but we're not going to go through all of them because it would take 2 days. He specializes in helping business owners transition out of their business so that they can enjoy the next chapter of life. So here at Tortuga, we do investment management and helping our clients who are focused on multi-generation wealth and helping these business owners get to that next phase of life. So a little fun fact about Kevin: he is an avid hiker and an avid Formula One fan. And so here we have pictures of him enjoying the Formula One race in Monaco and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Next, we have Kevin Berson, who is a fellow UCLA alum. Go Bruins! We actually went to college together and got reconnected after so many decades, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
Kevin Berson has a company called Connected Advisors, and he is an M&A consultant, and he also is a CEPA, and he has an expertise in selling businesses valued in the $5 to $100 million space across a broad set of industries, everything from technology to specialty trades, healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, and business services. One really fun fact about Kevin Berson, and I know it's confusing because there's 2 Kevins here. One really fun fact about Kevin Berson is that after college, him and his buddies went to every single baseball field in the U.S. and got to be on the Jay Leno show because that's such a neat accomplishment. I don't know if anyone else has done that before or after you, Kevin Berson. Do you know if anyone's tried to do that?
No, I don't. I mean, ours was pretty amazing. We got to be part of the 96 Olympics. Somebody I knew from UCLA was a pitcher on the baseball team, so we got to be part of the Olympics. And then we were guests on the Tonight Show when we were done. It was absolutely incredible trip. So it's pretty special.
Well, there you have it. All right. Well, thank you so much both for joining us today. So diving right in, Kevin Beidenkamp. So in our work with business owners here at Tortuga, we've often found that much of their net worth is tied up in their business. And so it just makes sense to consider their business exit and the valuation of their business when engaging in financial planning for their future, since it's such a huge part of what their net worth is comprised of. Can you speak a bit more about the importance of business owners having a clear and actionable business succession plan?
Sure. Thank you, Angela, and thank you to everybody that's joining us today. We really appreciate it, and hopefully this will be a really fun and informative webinar. And we are going to have additional ones in the future, so please stay tuned. But and we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So if you can think of something along the way, you can definitely shoot us a question. And I also am very excited and thankful that Kevin Berson's on with us, where we feel honored. And it is a little confusing because not only are there two Kevins, there's two Kevin B's. But at any rate, I think we're going to have a great hour for you. And just to go into Angela's question a little bit, why are we doing this today? Why is it important? I've been in the industry for a little over 28 years. I don't want to say we've seen it all because every day is a new day. However, what's been happening, I would say, or a big movement over the last 5 years is that your traditional private business owner is, the majority of them are baby boomers or of that generation, and they're aging. Some of the studies that we've seen from the Exit Planning Institute suggest that there are over 28 million privately held businesses in the United States. Of that 28 million, I think roughly 6 million of them are operating companies, which means they have payrolls and they have employees. A lot of the other ones are, just individually run companies, and those aren't necessarily the ones that this process works perfectly for, but it can. But the big thing here is that as that population of business owners is aging, they do need to start making some decisions. And the biggest thing that they need to do is start planning. Not everybody, I'll tell you, most business owners, they put their blood, sweat, and tears every day into their businesses. That's what they know. They don't know things about other planning outside of it. And many of them don't think of ever exiting because it's not going to happen to them. They're going to, run the course and work this till their last breathing moment. However, everyone is going to basically exit their business at some time. It might be to a relative, to a son or daughter, or to someone in their family. It might be to employees of their company, but everyone will exit. A lot of what the studies are showing us is that because of this aging population, roughly 76% of these privately held businesses are going to be looking to transition in the next 10 years. And as we mentioned, there's 28 million privately held companies. That is an enormous number. And it's going to put a lot of stresses and strains on the advisors that advise these business owners. So we really want to get out in front of that because the number is going to be so large. There's going to be a huge demand. And not only, I mentioned 76% of them are looking to potentially exit in the next 10 years. In the next 5 years, that number is 48%. So roughly half of them will be looking to make some sort of transition in the next 5 years. So at Tortuga Wealth, we really want to basically help our business owner clients, as well as other of those business owners, in the area and across the country, when they have questions, when they start to plan. The biggest thing is, how do I get started? Right. I don't know if I'm a business owner, many times they don't know the first thing about how to get started. So that's one of the reasons why this webinar, we thought we could kick off the first stage of basically helping those in our community to make good decisions.
Well, now with all these business owners, small business owners out there, what percentage do you guys think are actually prepared?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I would say more than half of business owners haven't done any exit planning at all. So, a lot of times we get a call. Yeah, no, it's pretty alarming. We get calls from business owners that are ready to sell their business, but maybe they're ready, but the business isn't ready. Maybe there's some problems with the business that really need to be addressed. When you go to market, you really have one shot at doing it right, and you really want to make sure that not only are you psychologically ready, you need to make sure that the business is going to look great to buyers. It needs to tell the right story. It needs to be presented properly. Professional buyers are looking at literally hundreds of deals per year. And when you want to hit the market, you want to make sure that you're telling you have the right information, the right packaging, and it's going to appeal to buyers, because if it doesn't, they're going to quickly move on.
Well, putting it in layman's terms, it almost seems like it's almost like selling a house. Before you sell a house, you need to make sure that the house is ready to be presented on the market and get, put the right price tag on it so that it's not being looked, people are not saying, oh, that's just too expensive for what it is, or, oh, that's a really good deal. And then you have all these bids coming in.
Right.
And I actually bring that up because I know somebody recently who's going through this right now, and they just didn't have all the right players in place to help them with their business sale. And now they're having to lower their price.
Right. Yeah, no, this is definitely a team sport. I mean, we like to partner with very professional wealth managers like Tortuga. We also bring in corporate attorneys that do a lot of M&A deals. A lot of business owners think that, they can do the deal with whoever they're, maybe the person that incorporated them, or maybe a trademark attorney, but you really need specialist M&A attorneys. They're a really key part of the team. And we also tend to partner with a lot of CPA firms and fractional CFOs, because the number one thing that we sell is the quality of the financials. The financials need to be bulletproof. Buyers are going to spend a lot of time doing due diligence on every number in the P&L and balance sheet. So you got to make sure that they are prepared properly. So we will definitely want to make sure that's probably the number one assessment that we do, is we look for the quality of the financials, and we like to bring in fractional CFOs and CPAs to make sure the financials are done properly, and have a monthly close process, that the financials reconcile the tax returns, that margins are reported consistently from period to period. And then there's a predictable monthly close process as well, so buyers can get timely data while the business is on market.
Hey, Kevin, I have a softball question for you, I believe, too, is when's the best time for a business owner to approach someone on something like this? I mean, is it ever too early, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's never too early, but realistically, we like to get involved 1 to 2 years ahead of a potential sale. We feel like that's really the right amount of time to make sure the financials can get cleaned up. A buyer is going to evaluate the business from a bunch of different factors. There's financials, there's operationally. The buyer wants to make sure that the business can survive without the owner. So it's going to be really important that there's a layer of middle management that's in place. It's important that the business has all of its key processes documented. It's important that all the key agreements are categorized, and we have an attorney making sure that there's no exposure from a legal point of view. So generally, that's about a year and a half, potentially 2 years before the sale. And we also want to start tracking the key KPIs for the industry that buyers are going to want. So we want to build a history of those KPIs, and hopefully we're showing that we're improving as we progress.
Absolutely. And I would say from our end also, it's in dealing with our business owner clients. And that's kind of the reason why I was thinking of that the whole time. There's never like an early time in this process, because we are constantly asking them, what are your thoughts on your retirement? And this might be 10 years before they're really starting to get into that mode, only because we start gathering information that's very useful to them. Like, oh, well, we know 2 other of our competitors that are in the area that probably would be very interested in getting rid of us, basically getting them out of the market. And that lets us have that conversation, even though it's way out there, because if we're managing their investments or their portfolio, it helps to basically kind of start intertwining that and start making some future plans for them too. So for us, I would say, it's like 10 years would be the time that we start having that conversation, just so that they have it in their mind that, at some point, if not sooner, this is going to be a major issue. Because Angela mentioned in her intro, I think statistics show that something like 80% of these business owners' net worth are typically tied up into their business. Yeah. And, if something goes wrong with that at the back end, terrible things can happen very quickly. So you kind of have to manage it over time.
Right. So it sounds like there is a lot of things that a business owner needs to consider before they actually exit their business. There seems to be a lot of balls in the air. So I know that here at Tortuga, we talk about these 5 steps of exit planning, business succession planning, if you will. Maybe that's something that you can go over briefly with us, Kevin Beidenkap.
Sure, no problem. So basically, the stages of business exit planning that we've lined out, I think there's a slide here on it. The first stage is discovery, and basically that's just an introductory stage where the planner is getting together with the business owner, and they're talking about everything that they need to know. They're getting together all of their financials and everything else that Kevin mentioned. We're not going to go into it too in depth. We're just going to basically briefly describe each phase. But basically at Tortuga, we want to help the business owner clarify what they're looking for and what sort of time horizon they might be looking at. The second stage is protection. And in that stage, we're just trying to mitigate any sort of negatives that could come in and impact the process of the exit planning process early on. And then in the growth stage, that's where a lot of advisors get involved with, with the business owner. They're trying to increase the valuation of the company and make for the best exit price possible. So that's a stage that's very important to each business if they're wanting to grow. Some businesses just want to exit quickly. There could be an illness or something else that's forcing it to be done, quicker than typical. But in a perfect scenario, the advisors would come together and basically try and increase the valuation and add value and get a more significant price for it at the exit. And then fourth is the options, and that's where the advisors are just working with the business owners to look at what types of exit options they have. It could be they can sell to their employees. It could be another family member. It could be a strategic buyer. There's a lot of options, and to have the advisors that are experienced and trustworthy work through with the business owners is vitally important during this stage, because that will, and sometimes, and Angela, you mentioned selling your house. Sometimes you don't want to sell to the highest price, right? The highest bidder. Sometimes you want to sell to someone that feels right, that's going to, and in this case, take care of your current clients and run the business respectfully. So that goes into the whole options stage. And then the final stage is execution. And Kevin Berson knows this one better than anyone. This is basically the final, getting together the legal and all of the paperwork, getting the doc signed, really concluding the sale, obviously negotiating the best price, but getting it to the right buyer, the one that you prefer, and putting it all together and finalizing it. So there's a brief introduction of the 5 stages.
Okay, well, maybe Kevin Beidenkap, I know you just went over all of that very quickly. Could you kind of go into depth a little bit more about that first step of discovery? If I am this business owner and I just don't even know what to do, and I come to you, what's that first step look like? What is that first discovery? What are we talking about?
So, discovery is everything, because that's going to build the foundation of the entire rest of the product. So, and Kevin Berson had mentioned earlier, it's the business financials are very important. But even before we get into that, as wealth advisors, a lot of times what we're going to look for first is their personal financial situation, right? Because a business owner, they want the total package, right? They want to make sure that at the end of all of this process, if it's going to work out well for them, they're going to have enough money to live their perfect life. And that's determining what the income needs are going to be. Also, what are their ideas about the next stage? And that doesn't always happen at the beginning, but it's time to start that conversation about what you're going to do after the sale. And I'll tell you, we have an alarming statistic also that we run across all the time. Business owners, after a transaction, 1 year after the transaction, 70% of the business owners say they regret selling their business. And it's not about the price and about everything else. More times than not, it's that they didn't really plan for the next stage of their life, the next phase of their life. So going back to discovery, this is when we want to build the foundation of everything about the whole exiting, and make sure that we're assessing their personal, professional, and financial readiness, and putting that all together and syncing it,
And emotional readiness, it sounds like emotional readiness.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely a huge point that's commonly overlooked, is that the business needs to be ready, the business owner needs to be financially prepared, but most importantly, psychologically, they need to be ready, because these businesses that they create over a period of decades are children to them, and it's a big part of their identity, and it's who they are. So it's not something to be taken lightly, and the business owner really needs to be committed to running into their next chapter and not running away from their business. And if we feel a business owner isn't psychologically ready, we're not going to try to force it. You can't force it. The deals aren't going to go through. So you really need to make sure that the business owner really takes that time to do that kind of emotional checklist to make sure that they truly are ready.
And to that point too, and to that point, sorry, Angela, to that point too, there's other parties involved here too. I mean, the other shareholders are your employees. And they don't always have to be notified, at this point, right? Because we're just doing a discovery. We're looking into whether this is going to work out, and putting a plan together. But employees, your family, and Angela, when you talk about emotionally, the family is a big part of that. A lot of times we hear that the wife is used to this sort of lifestyle, or I should say the spouse is, has this sort of lifestyle while the other person is busy working all the time. So they need to buy into that might not be the case here very soon. So it's also the customers of the business. They don't need to buy into that, but it's part of that conversation when you first start. Also, and Kevin can really talk to this as well, is that you need to basically spell out to that business owner what this timeline is going to look like. And it's not, that might be a moving target, but at the same time, at least they know what to be prepared for, when we're going through this whole process.
So I know that, during the step 2 of this 5-step process that we talk about, there is this protection element. There's so many things that could go wrong with the deal. I know we just talked about, readiness, emotional, financial, but say, for instance, you are ready financially, say you are ready emotionally. What are some of the things that could go wrong that you can circumvent by being prepared? Or maybe you're not ready to exit the business. What are some of the things that could happen to you that people are not thinking about?
Well, from my perspective, the most important thing is you have to be able to survive intense diligence by a buyer. When we're selling to, most commonly, we sell a lot of deals with private equity firms. They are going to bring in teams of third-party CPAs, attorneys, operations people to do extensive diligence. So whatever you have shared, you need to be able to back it up. So we had a deal, unfortunately, fall apart in the late hours because The seller had a bunch of cash payments that had been made to employees and contractors that weren't accounted for, and um, the disclosure on that wasn't as tight as it should have been, and it really made the seller look like there was a character issue. So really, the seller was not super upfront about what happened, and you know, this is a $40 million deal. We're pretty deep into the process, and the buyer just lost trust. So it really comes down to trust more than anything. So that everything that you share, you need to be able to back it up. There's really no getting around the truth. The buyers will discover it. So our philosophy at Connected is we want to disclose everything about the business up front, because from our perspective, the worst thing that can happen would be a buyer finds out some material fact about the business that wasn't disclosed, and then we all lose. You know, the seller's going to spend a lot of time and effort, and this buyer's just going to walk away. So we want to get at everything up front, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as long as you disclose it early, you can generally get around it. But that was one particular case where not everything was disclosed to us. So therefore, we couldn't disclose it to the buyer, and we had a bit of a mess.
Yeah, that's very, very good example. Also, you know, like we keep going back to real estate, but in real estate, location, location, location. In the exit planning, I think it's disclose, right? So that everything's out on the table. And then, you know, the buyer that's looking at every nook and cranny might, you know, they might not have any questions, or it eliminates a lot of their doubts right off the bat. But also in this stage, you know, you want to begin to start thinking about if then scenarios, like if this happens, then we're going to go this way, and just prepare for potentially, you know, market conditions might change. The pandemic was a great lesson for all of us on how to handle some of these scenarios. You know, maybe the market dries up immediately, or interest rates, if interest rates continue to rise, you know, that's going to slow everything down. So it changes time horizon, readiness. It could affect your business. And you always want to be selling into strength. So that's how the timeline also, you want to time it so that everything is running smoothly, you know, and everyone is doing well during that. And also I would say in the stage of protection, it's more or less like, make sure that you have all of the protection within your company before, and that's part of the disclosure. You know, like, do you have buy-sell agreements with key employees? You know, if something happened to you, and that's really the mitigating risks, is that if something happened to the founder, or if something happened to a lead manager or something along that, is that going to affect the sale? Does it affect the revenues of the company? You know, there's all sorts of other factors that go into that, and you know, that's countless. But we want to mitigate as much of those. And then also, finally, if the sale doesn't go through, what's our backup strategy, right? Do we go back and try and grow some more? Do we try and you know, basically pick out a different type of buyer? There's a lot of other things that you can do to protect yourself if this process, you know, your first run through isn't successful. You just want to create, you don't want it to be done and walk away from it because the problem still exists.
So I know, you know, well before any of this happens, your business is going great. You have no intention of selling your business. You're in your 40s. I know we talk about the 5 Ds a lot. I don't know if our audience understands or knows what these 5 Ds might be. What are the 5 Ds that could really stump up your business well before you want to or are even thinking about exiting? What are these 5 Ds? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, Kevin Bidenkemp.
Sure. Yeah. And that's not the most extensive, basically, list, but they're kind of they're good guidelines, right? And it makes you think about some potential risks. But divorce is one of them. Disability, disagreement. That could be disagreement with your employees. It could be disagreement with your partners. It could be disagreement with your family on if this is really the thing to do right now. I guarantee you that this is not going to be perfectly smooth. So you want to eliminate some of those problems. Maybe it's by, starting it earlier so that you can basically get through that period and get everyone on board. Disruptions. I mentioned the pandemic, that was a major disruption worldwide. And there was a lot of fear. So that also, something like that could really lengthen the timeline also. And the last and least preferable of these is death. And it could be the death of the founder or the creator. I mean, you can just imagine that a person builds a business and runs it for 40 years and there's an untimely death. I mean, if you're a potential buyer of that business, things have changed dramatically, right? And that's why being prepared is so important, and addressing this as early as possible, even if it's midway through your lifetime of working in the business, that you can start talking about it. Like, what if there is a death? What if something comes up and you know that you have 1 year to live? What do you do at that point? So you want to be prepared with all of these things. There are other things that we can do. There are insurance products where we can protect the business, protect the people also. But those are basically the 5 Ds that Angela referred to.
Along those lines, I saw a really sad news article this week about a young business owner in his 40s who passed away unexpectedly. He had built a successful action sports business, and I had actually talked to him a couple of times over the last couple of years about getting started with exit planning, and he was never quite ready. And I didn't know he was sick, but he ended up passing away with no will, no buy-sell agreement, and now there's just a big mess happening. So yeah, I definitely encourage that all business owners start some kind of planning. Talk to me, talk to Kevin, talk to their attorney, but just get started one way or another.
Yeah, I would suggest, given that example, the value of their business is close to zero. Yeah. When with the key employee being gone, and basically, that was the person that probably generated everything, dealt with the contract. So one thing that a lot of business coaches always suggest too is make sure that you have an operating business that you can step away from. And this probably is a webinar in itself. Yep. But make sure that your management staff and the other employees, it's something where it runs itself. That's and after that, if the key person's gone, the business is still intact and it still can continue on, and it can you can still basically sell it or continue running through a family member or whatever. But that's a great example, Kevin. And there's so many landmines like that. And it's like constantly we hear stories like this where it wasn't something anyone planned for. It just happened. Yeah. And that's the one thing that if you can have a business that runs without you, the key employee, then it's much more valuable.
Yeah, one of the tests that we use is, can the business owner take a 3-week vacation and can the business still run optimally? If that's the case, you have a very sellable business and you're very likely to be able to sell at the high end of the range for your industry. That's definitely a key test that we use.
Yeah, and why would you not want to take a 3-week vacation?
Exactly.
So I know that part of the valuation that drives the higher multiples is, making sure that the business is growing, and that the business owner or owners are doing the right things to maximize their eventual sales price. Kevin, Berson, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the growth areas and the things that a business owner could do to drive up value and all that.
Yeah, we like to look at 8 different levers of value, and we can talk about that in a sec. But this is the deals that we work on in this space, which are typically businesses that sell from 5 to 50 million, are typically going to be the median is about 4 to 6 times EBITDA. Most of the businesses we sell are on an EBITDA basis because if EBITDA is the earnings of the business, it's essentially the operating income, interest, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And most businesses are valued on a multiple of EBITDA. Some businesses, if they're technology focused, if they have a major recurring revenue element like a SaaS, software as a service business, those may trade at a revenue multiple. But by and large, most businesses we see selling EBITDA multiple. So our job is to tell the best possible story we can for the business and make sure we can defend that story. And we are looking for businesses to sell for typically 4 to 6 times. But if we have really good businesses, we can sell them for more than 6 times. We've sold a few businesses at over 8 times, and those businesses had something really unique about them. They had something proprietary. They had a brand. They had some technology. They had a really what Warren Buffett would call a moat, just something that they do better than anybody else that's pretty defensible. They're growing. There's high barriers to entry. They have great systems in place. They have a team beyond the owner. Their financials are very high quality. They have very tight business processes, and they could tell a really good story of where they are in their industry and give buyers confidence that the business will keep growing for the years ahead. And that's really part of what we do when we create marketing materials, is try to draft that narrative.
So Kevin, one question too, when you're in this stage and you're trying to grow the valuation, get the best exit price possible at the exit, what percentage would you say the owners tell the employees and involve them in this whole process? Because if the employees are working in line with management to help grow the process, it's probably much easier. Do you find that they usually involve the employees, or
no? It's a very, very slippery slope, and it's probably a whole other conversation. But yeah. Generally, the CFO is going to be a very key person on the deal. The CFO is going to be required, maybe the head of operations, but generally we respect the confidentiality. We don't want employees to know. We don't want customers to know. We don't want suppliers to know, because these deals are complicated. They take a lot of time. There's a lot of ups and downs, and nothing is guaranteed until that wire transfer hits on the day of closing. So we really don't want employees to know about it unless the owner really believes that, and that's really the owner's decision. So we kind of create a circle of trust for people that are really essential to the deal. Often we recommend that the business owners come up with incentive plans, because those employees become very key to the deal. And if they leave, it's probably going to be pretty disruptive to the process. But yeah, I mean, we've had situations where employees found out, and they made some very unreasonable demands on the business owner. They knew that they were a key employee, so really don't want that can of worms being opened. Same thing goes for customers as well. Really don't want customers knowing about the deal because they can extract some leverage as well. So we got to be really smart how we manage that. Typically, I leave those conversations for the week before closing. When everything's done, contracts are ready to be signed. Maybe they're already signed. Those are the conversations that happen in the final couple days.
Understood. Yeah, and even with the insiders, the employees, they could go tell your competitors, right? And the competitors could do things to sabotage.
Yeah, absolutely.
The company
absolutely.
In the media and everything else, and slander your company or something, just to kind of knock you out of that, final ramp, so to say. You did share with us at one point when we spoke last, and I thought this was really interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about when you employ this growth model, that you can extract typically a certain sort of growth rate, from where a typical price would be to where a really ideal price would be? Could you share a little of that with us?
Yeah, sure. And we have a process that we've created called ExitBoost, where we really hold the business owner's hand every step of the way with the exit planning process. As Kevin mentioned, the process is just unknown and causes a lot of anxiety. So we try to break it down. But we've had clients that have increased their valuation anywhere from 20 to 120%. There's certainly no guarantees that we would make on that, but business owners that are willing to go through the process are very mindful of how their business would come off to buyers, and business owners that are willing to go through this process. We find that we have a lot of wins along the way. Just being prepared properly, being able to understand what buyers are going to expect really goes a long way. And then if you have a business that's really well prepared in a nice industry, then buyers will compete. And whatever price you thought you might get, you'd be surprised. We had a deal a couple of years ago as an e-commerce company. We were expecting 50 to 60 million for this business, and we ended up getting over 100 million because the business was well prepared. We could answer all the buyers' questions, and we really had the business ready to go. So buyers will compete. So there's really no rule of thumb on what you can get in terms of a premium. But if you go through this process, your businesses will be prepared to sell. They will sell more quickly, and the business owner will be more psychologically ready to go through the process.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge difference in sales price. And that just says a lot about the importance of planning, and planning early is what it sounds like to me. So now we are getting close to the end of our time, and we definitely want to leave some room for Q&A. We definitely have some questions that have come through. So, it sounds like this is, I think earlier someone mentioned that this is a team sport. What are some of the different types of advisors or other professionals that need to get involved to make this a successful plan for the typical business owner?
Yeah, I would say we will always want to bring in a wealth manager. We need to really make sure that the business, first of all, is going to provide the after-tax proceeds that the business owner is expecting. Definitely want to make sure that, if we sell at where we think the market's going to be, that's going to be a win for them and will provide for their family for years to come. So wealth manager is absolutely key. The M&A attorney is essential, somebody that specializes in M&A. Also, the CPA is really, really critical. We want to look at tax planning strategies to mitigate tax risk. We also need a fractional CFO. I mean, some businesses have these folks in them, but most of them don't. They really haven't spent on the financial function. So the fractional CFO would be that kind of fourth person that we consider to be pretty key part of that team.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you have anything else to add to that?
Oh, that sounds right in line with what I was going to say too. And, from our side too, especially in the discovery phase, we like the business owner's estate planning attorney, right? Because that's where, we talked about getting their business, personal, everything aligned and synced up. And a lot of times the estate planning attorney, that's where we can tell if their private life is, if they've protected themselves personally also, and also what sort of planning that they've done on that side, because ultimately we're trying to get to, you're here, what would you like to see, as your end game? And not only what would you like to see, but what do you need? What do you need to sustain your lifestyle? What would you need to live your perfect lifestyle? So many times the estate planning attorney would play, a key role in that as well from our side, in getting them ready. And then also on the backside, after a sale has been done, the attorney helps basically with the CPA, saving and realizing as much of that sales proceeds as possible.
Okay, thank you. So there's another question here. Are there situations where business owners can retain a small percentage of ownership for their children, or does a sale always entail 100% turnover to a buyer?
Yeah, so every deal is different, but the answer is yes. There are definitely situations where the seller can retain equity. It's called carried equity. And generally, when we're selling businesses to private equity, they want the sellers to stay involved. They typically are buying 60 to 80% of the business, and the owners are keeping that portion with the hopes that they will continue to be a part of the business and help grow it towards a second exit that could be much more lucrative down the road. So yeah, we definitely see that quite a bit where the sellers retain equity.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that also. And I had a good friend. They had a family business that was in their family probably 70 years, and they ended up selling it 3 times, before it was finalized. They sold it to a private equity group, and then basically the private equity group struggled with it. Another private equity group bought it after that. And then, you go through business cycles too. We talk about timing and, getting the highest price. You never know after you sell something if it's going to be successful afterwards. So even the second private equity group that bought it ended up selling it to a public company at the end. And then that was the final. And to your point, Angela, the CEO at the time was the most familiar with the business, was the most familiar with the clients, the contracts, everything. So they were a vital, they played a vital role in that whole process. And, having some ownership along the way helped keep that person really involved. And that's, to Kevin's point too, it's like, if it's private equity, they want you involved. They need you because they don't want to have to relearn the whole business. And they want to be introduced to all the key players in the business and in that industry. So that's a great way to do it, to keep them involved. But if it's just a straightforward, it probably depends on the deal size also. If it was a mom and pop type of operation, they probably want you to sell and leave just so that they can extract what they want out of it and maximize their profits going forward too. So like Kevin said, every deal is different, and that's what's so interesting about this whole the whole process, is that there's never that you never run across the same exact thing day after day.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then there's another question here. What is the first thing a business owner should do for exit planning? I know there's probably 2 different, I think we briefly touched upon it, but just so that we can answer this question from the audience.
I would say there's a couple different tracks for this. I think you definitely want to understand, from a wealth management perspective, you want to understand, what your number needs to be. What number do you need to have to
like
feel
the wealth gap?
The wealth gap.
Is that what we're talking about?
Talking about the wealth gap. And then where I come in is we talk about where the business, if we sell the business for what we think it's going to sell for, do you have a wealth gap? Hopefully the business sale will give you the proceeds you need, so there is no gap. So we do that analysis. So we're looking at, if you were to sell the business today, here's a likely outcome for you. And if you are not willing or ready to sell today, and you're willing to work on a few things, then we can move the valuation, we can move the multiple from, let's call it 5 times to 8 times by doing X, Y, and Z. So that's a type of analysis that we will do up front, and working closely with the wealth management team as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'll just add to, what they can do, what they should do first, right? And it kind of, in my opinion, it comes back to the saying, get your house in order first, right? And business owners aren't naturally, they're good at running their business and, getting the day-to-day stuff taken care of, but getting their house in order, that could be their personal finances, and it's also the business. And Kevin had said this multiple times on this call too, that financials are so very important to a buyer. And so they need their personal, just so that they know what their number is, but also the business side too. So if they get that in order, and then if I have one takeaway that I'd like to leave this call to, it's start early. You don't have to, you could be mid-cycle in your run at a company or with a company and still start getting these issues, because it's practice, it makes perfect, right? And so if you have all of your financials in order and you're like a young person, say mid-40s or something like that, that habit is just going to stay with you. And so you're going to do a better job looking inside your company and looking at the mechanics of it, and internally starting to grow it on your own before this process. And the other thing too is that I see advertisements from companies that are in this space, and they're always saying, you know, we'll sell your business in 150 days, right? They have this like promise that you know, if you hand it over to them, they are experts at selling it within 150 days. Well, that's it might be fine for some, but at the same time, it takes time to do it right. And you know, Kevin talked a lot about the strategies that they employ to help grow the valuation. And you'll be shocked if you take the time and do it the right way, what you can retrieve in the end game and get your you know, the highest possible exit price.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We are getting close to the end here. I know that you know, other people have other questions. And so some of these questions that are more specific, or if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. After this webinar, we will have a recording of it, so that will be available. We will also be sending out materials, the brochures that we've mentioned here during this webinar. And like I said, we will have all the contact information that you need, and we can definitely go further in depth with your specific situation with you at any point in time.
I'm just answering Carol's question right now. It's a really good one.
Oh,
about
okay.
How to keep your books. So yeah, a lot of times we see businesses on a cash basis, and for small businesses, I think that's okay if you're under a couple million revenue. But if you're going to be dealing with a buyer that's much larger, chances are that their books are on an accrual basis, and they're going to want to be able to analyze your books on an accrual basis as well. So we would definitely look into that. And if, like I said, if your business is of you know, kind of a few million and greater, we probably want to put you on an accrual basis, because you're probably going to get the most value that way as well. And you can still file your taxes on a cash basis, but in terms of, you know, evaluating the business for valuation purposes, most buyers are typically going to want to see GAAP accrual based financials. Good
I
question.
second that.
Thanks.
that is a really good question. We've actually had our CFO tell us that we needed to do accrual basis instead of cash.
I have one question for Kevin also. Kevin, you have mentioned a few times how important a fractional CFO is.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone is really aware or
Yeah.
have heard that term.
Yeah, I would say, you know, from my experience doing this for 10 years, most businesses that we see, their books are just not in great shape. They basically have QuickBooks, and they have a bookkeeper that gets the transactions in there, but they're not really analyzing the financials. They're not done consistently from month to month or year to year. Sometimes things are put in one expense category, sometimes in another. You know, it's sometimes hard to reconcile those financials to the tax return. So when we have a business in that case, we will recommend a fractional CFO, which is basically somebody who has, you know, been a CPA in the past or been a CFO for other companies, and now they tend to work on a fractional basis, which means you can get them anywhere between, you know, 5 hours a week and full time. And I highly advise, you know, bringing these people onto your team. They're not super expensive, and it can be done in a very cost-effective way, but they can very quickly get your books up to a professional caliber. And that person becomes incredibly important once you get into due diligence, working with sophisticated buyers, because they understand the language of M&A, and they can really help create a lot of value for you as well. So Tortuga and Connected, we're plugged into the space, and we know lots of these folks. So come to us if you need a referral.
That's great. And yeah, I can share a story too. We have a client that's a fractional CFO on the East Coast, and he we say this person is like a hired gun. Because he works with private equity. They bring him into deals that they've recently purchased, and I can tell you, every time he goes into a company, he's shocked with what he sees initially. Like companies have no idea about doing books correctly, filings, and everything is a shamble, right? So I would say, to your point, in very quick order, he can make it look very professional. And just show them where you have to be listing this and you cannot be doing this. So you're right. If they were, a former C-suite type of person, or, an accountant for a larger company too, when they go into these other, I'll say smaller companies, privately held companies, they can see right off the bat, there's things like just, red flags everywhere, and they can put out those fires immediately and then move from there. So just that in itself is like a total turnaround.
It's a turnaround, and it's also essential on larger deals to have somebody like that. Maybe you have that person in-house, but if you don't, that person is essential and will pay for themselves several times over.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And the next 3 webinars that we will have, the next one is going to be on June 13th, which is selling your business, maximizing return. The next one after that is June 27th. This is going to be on passing wealth and values to the next generation. And then July 11th is live well and give well, charitable gifting strategies. So please be sure to tune in for the next 3 webinars, and we hope this has been educational. Thank you so much. Bye.
And thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for being with us too. A lot of information, and we really appreciate it. And Angela, thank you. A great job moderating the call.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys too. Thanks. It was fun to be here and do this. Love to do it
Excellent.
again.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.